Good morning, church. Is God involved in our lives or not? And if He is involved, where do we find His inspiration reaching out to help us? Yesterday, Saturday, our church volunteers gave out food to almost 900 people who came to our doors in search of food. Now, we could ask, were they English speakers or Spanish speakers? Were they from River Oaks or Weatherford? Were they black or brown? We could ask all sorts of questions about how one is different from another. But the differences were really irrelevant in this time of pandemic when people are looking for food. Some other differences. John Hume was born 2 years before me. He lived a little over 100 miles from me. He was in the north, I was in the south. He lived in a district not unlike mine. And he watched as his mother borrowed money from the moneylenders on our streets every week, just as I watched my mother borrow money from the moneylenders on our street. Just as lots of kids watched their mothers borrowing money from the moneylenders. Now, I hated these moneylenders, and I grew up with an abiding anger towards them. When John grew up, he went to the priest in his district and with his help set up a credit union where people could borrow money at reasonable rates. "50 years ago, these people would have felt that they're going to be forever renters, always the borrowers. But because of John, they're now the proud owners of their own houses. When I was a young boy, I hated the British for what they were doing to our country. John saw it too. But he saw or felt that the only way to bring peace and justice into this environment was to think outside the box and get both groups to come to an agreement on what is reasonable and fair. John was very much involved in the peace movement in Ireland, and he finally managed to bring peace to a 300-year-old national struggle. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and the Irish people honour him as one of the greatest Irishmen of all time. Now, why couldn't I see that side of John and do that myself? How is it that I grew up with resentment and animosity? And he grew up with insight and a willingness to work for peace. I'd like to read you a passage from today's scriptures. It's from First Book of Kings, chapter 19. At the mountain of God, Horeb, Elijah came to a cave where he took shelter. Then the Lord said to him, "Go outside and stand on the mountain before the Lord. The Lord will be passing by." A strong and heavy wind was rending the mountains and crushing rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake there was fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire there was a tiny whispering sound. When he heard this, Elijah hid his face in his cloak and went and stood at the entrance to the cave. In the Book of Kings, Elijah hated the priests of Baal. And he egged his community on to destroy them, which they did. The queen who followed Baal was angry with Elijah, and she sent her troops to track him down. And so he's hiding in this cave. And he hears the voice of God say to him, "Come outside to the front of the cave. God is going to pass by." He hears the thunder and the lightning and the rocks getting crushed in the earthquake and the fire. But he doesn't feel that God is in these. And then he hears a gentle breeze. And so he goes out and bows down at the entrance to the cave. It's a similar message that Matthew gives to his community when he tells the parable of Jesus walking on the water. Peter looks in amazement at Jesus and says to him, "Can I walk on the water too?" And Jesus says, "Come." But when Peter tries it, the waves back up against him, and he's fearful, and in a panic, he asks God for help. Jesus reaches out and touches him and says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" There are lots of good people in the world, like John Hume, or Jesus, or a repentant Elijah. And when we look at our politicians, are we swayed by those who show resentment and animosity towards those who don't agree? Or are we encouraged by those who call us to peaceful agreement and ways of peace? Now, we have a national election in a couple more weeks. And so we ask ourselves the question, which way does God point to as the way to bring about his kingdom? God bless you.